yeah, like I've mentioned before, but yeah, Kabukicho was one of the first places I wanted to visit the first time I even went to Tokyo. Yeah. And it was because of, you know, the manga I was reading, and they would always have the Kabukicho gate
right
in some panel in the comic, and I'm like, all right, well, that's definitely a place I need to go to. I mean, thinking about it, you're reading comics about people doing all sorts of unsavory bad things. That's your first place you want to go check out? But the answer was yes.
Yes.
And so, you know, the first time I went was in 2004, and I had won that contest, that manga contest online, so I got to go with a group of tourists as you know, the prize was like an all expenses paid trip. So I went there, but the tour didn't go to Kabukicho, which I guess the more we talk about this, it makes more sense to me now why. But I mean, they do have Don Quixote there, which is like a big tourist attraction, but you got to be in that area. We went to other places. So as I mentioned before, Brian was in Tokyo, so I hit him up on a day where they gave us like a day to kind of do whatever. So I was like, yo, like, and he's like, oh, what do you want to see? And I'm like, I want to go to Kabukicho. And he was like, he's like, no. He's like, why, dude? And I'm like, no, man. Like, I'm like, yo, like Shamo. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Shamo was a comic. It was a fighting comic that I liked, but it was, again, it was like, it dealt with like the darker aspects of Tokyo, and you know, a bunch of stuff, drug addiction, murder, like, again, not like the happiest stuff, but to me, I really liked the comic, and so, you know, and also Brian read it too, because Jimmy owned the whole series.
Yeah, Jimmy.
When we used to go to Jimmy's manga kisa in his apartment, we'd sit there for hours reading comics. So by the time, you know, I got to go to Tokyo and Brian was there, I'm like, that's where we're going. Let's go to Kabukicho, which he did not want to do. But we were walking around. We went to Hakata Tenjin, the ramen spot with the
tonkotsu.
what's it called? The tonkotsu ramen with the little pig on the
Hakata style tonkotsu ramen.
Yeah. So we had that, and then we went, and you know, and then I saw it from across the street. I saw the gate, and I was like, oh, it's just like in the comics. Yeah, I was super excited. And so we're walking around, and you know, Brian wasn't that excited, but I just assumed because he'd been there so many times, he was just like, whatever. But one of the reasons I really liked Kabukicho is because there's always something happening. It's pretty lively. Yeah. There's a lot of people. There's, you know, like you said, there's a lot of lights and a lot of billboards and stuff. Even without the Godzilla thing and the whole, you know, I love
Kabukicho.
Like, yeah, like without all of that, it was still like amazing. And it had this weird bar. It was called Hige Girl. And it was like I guess it was kind of like the Japanese version of like burlesque. It was like a transvestite burlesque show. And I guess one of the kind of things about this place is that like they would get some real rough looking people for their show. So you'd see some osang like and it was called Hige Girl, which is like bearded girls. Right. And this was ages ago. I wonder if it's still there now, and I wonder like what the deal is, and if they've changed their style or whatever, if they've become more popular, or I wonder what it is, because, you know, nowadays we see a lot more of that than we did back then. Back then, you know, seeing a man wearing a dress with a beard and makeup was very...
It's probably still there.
Right. But it's very uncommon to see that.
Right.
You know, nowadays I see that in LA, like every once in a while. It's way more common. So like... and they would wear weird things, like they would go out and pass their flyers.
Right.
And they would wear, you know, the onigiri.
Yeah.
The head thing, you know, where your face sticks out of it. I remember seeing that for the first time, and it was a Hige Girl guy, and it was just crazy. And like, you know, they put part of it is it's like a comedy show. I actually ended up going once.
Oh, okay.
I went, years later, before coming back to the US, somebody invited me to go, and he's like, "Ita koto aru?" And I'm like, "No," and I'm just like, "Oh, ja, iko. Let's go together. Let's go." And I'm like, "All right, cool." and it was amazing. We'll talk about it some other time. But they put their makeup on like real crazy.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's not makeup to beautify. It's makeup to like
Just
horrify. No, just to scare you, dude. Like it's amazing. So like that type of stuff I would only see in like an area like Kabukicho. You know, if you go to Shinagawa or like some other, you're not going to see anything like that. You're going to see cafes and real kind of like understated kind of businesses. But like
Roppongi or Shinjuku 2丁目, which is the
Right.
LGBTQ
Well, yeah.
town.
exactly. So, so that, and then the host, and there's just so many characters, and like
Right.
my whole thing, especially when I was, you know, a couple years later when I moved there and I was living there, I spent most of my time inside drawing, right? So I only had about like 3 days off a month to just do whatever I wanted, see my friends, hang out, socialize. So, you know, I wanted to go somewhere where I could see a lot of things, you know, and kind of like fit in as much, you know, as many experiences as possible within that time frame. So like Shinjuku just naturally seemed like that was a place to go to like put all that excitement in. But Brian wasn't game for that, I think. So we're walking around, I'm like, oh look, it's that thing. He's like, yeah. And then now we're probably, and we walked all over the place, you know, because we were there. We're just like, okay, you know, I wanted to check out, you know.
Was it nighttime or
Anything.
daytime?
It started in the afternoon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it was still, there was still daylight out. And then we walked for, you know, a couple hours. And so it started getting darker. And then around nighttime, you know how things change.
Yeah. Kabukicho was waking up.
Yeah. So we're walking, and then we're getting closer to the area you were talking about, you know, like the real Kabukicho, right?
Hanamichidori.
And we're walking, and then I see this, and I see this old bald, fat Japanese guy wearing a yellow suit, and it was like a yellow, like a bird yellow, like big bird yellow, 3-piece suit, and the guy's yelling, like just going crazy, going off on a group of people, and they were all wearing suits. And, you know, they were all bigger than him and younger than him. And this guy was just yelling, and they were all just standing there in silence, not saying a single thing. It was very weird. It was very weird. And so I'm looking, and then I'm like, Brian, like, what's going on? Who's that dude? And I'm like, is that a comedian? Like, who is that? Because he's just wearing some outlandish stuff, right? And then I look at Brian, and Brian's just super quiet, and he's just staring at the ground. And I'm like, dude, and he's just like, no, he's like, yabai. He's like, you know, like, we gotta get out of here.
We need to get
And I'm like, what do you mean, dude? I'm like, and then he's like, no, we gotta go. And he's like pulling out my jacket. He's like, nah, like, let's go, you know? So I'm like, okay. So like we're walking, but it was like a narrow street. So we had to walk by them. So we're walking, and then, you know, and I'm looking, this is my first time in Tokyo also, you know, like I'm being super touristy here. My eyes are like, and, you know, I'm looking, and this guy's yelling at them, and they're just quiet. And then I thought, is this Yakuza? Is this what's going on? But again, that yellow suit really threw me off, dude.
Like the mask.
Yeah, it was like the mask. It was straight up. It was Jim Carrey's zoot suit, dude. So he just didn't have the hat, dude. That was it. So we keep walking, you know, and then after that, you know, I asked Brian, I'm like, yo, what's up, dude? And he's like, no, man, like that was like some serious shit was going down. Like this dude is like some like top boss dude. You know, just like really angry about something. And he's like, you know, you don't want to be around for that. You don't want to be seen looking at what's going on. Like you just don't want to be. You want to be invisible when if something like that happens. So I was like, okay. Obviously, to me, I didn't know anything. To me, it was hilarious. Like I didn't sense any danger. But again, you're not from there, so how would you know? You know, so like I took Brian's word for it. I mean, either way, a group that big, you don't want to start anything anyway, right?
Right. Yeah.
You know, it just doesn't matter what they're wearing or what, you know,
Yeah.
So
That's one thing my boys will tell me. Like, ダック一人で歩くのは大丈夫だけど、it's okay for you to walk around 散歩, but don't get into anybody's business.
Right.
If somebody starts swinging at you, run away. Unless it's a life or death situation, then you have to fight. But then, other than that, just run away. Just mind your own business. Don't look at people for, I don't know, 10 seconds or something like that. Yeah, I know these things. Don't worry. So
right.
Probably, yeah.
And they're telling you specifically about Kabukicho.
The Kabukicho boys. My boys were telling me that.
About that area, not other places.
Not other places.
Yeah.
Only in Kabukicho.
Right. Because again, I want to stress that Tokyo's the safest city I've ever lived in. So like we're talking about an area where like weird things happen every once in a while. But I don't want to give the impression that people are coming at you swinging in Tokyo because nothing could be further from the truth. Like it's like people, number one, people in Japan don't like confrontation.
Right.
You know, like it's just culturally, you know, it's one of the reasons why people are so polite is because confrontation is something that's just kind of frowned upon or at least avoided at any cost, basically, you know. So it's you'd rather like hold your tongue and not say anything and just kind of deal with stuff rather than maybe give somebody a piece of your mind or tell them something that you think they might not agree with. Like you kind of want to get along. That's the thing. That's the way to do things in Japan. So fighting or physical altercations or yelling and shoving and that type of stuff.
Nah.
You're rarely ever gonna see that. Like I lived there 4 years, and you know, like, I think about what I just told you. I spent a lot of time inside drawing, but when I went out, I really went out and tried to see as much as I could. And like that's something you don't see a lot unless you're in like some kind of Mizushobai area, like the water business district, aka bars, brothels, host and hostess clubs, that type of stuff where adults go and play. And alcohol is involved is where you might see that type of stuff. But even in those scenarios, it's still not that common. This was back in LA. And you've been there too. You've read comics there too.
Yeah.
Sure.
Most of my Japanese mangas.
You read at Jimmy's, right?
Yeah. Like Japanese mangas, not the illegal Korean bootleg ones.
Right. Yeah, so shout out to Senor James for letting us read his collection. And actually, I received tons of manga from Jimmy. When Jimmy went back to Japan, he gave me probably around 1,000 books. Yeah, so yo, dude, thank you very much, dude.